Hey
guys, Trevor Holt here. It's been another big week of fighting fire ants. I just thought I'd give you a bit of an update on some of the experiences that I'm finding, treating literally hundreds of nests over different environments. Generally, I find that the soil type has a big difference in the application time, and different soil types create different approaches, especially in this really dry weather that we're experiencing here. Some places haven't got any rain or any of the storms, so it's still quite dry, and there's a lot of cracking in some of the soils, especially up at some of the ranges there at the Marburg Ranges. There's a lot of cracked soil and dry land there, and it takes a fair bit of time to get the heat into the fire ant's nest, and it's very hard to backfill it with hot water. So again, I just want to reiterate, this hot water method is a continuous hot water approach, and what we're trying to do is kill the queen and the brood in the process. So approximately in the nest at a given time, there's about 10% of the colony in the nest. So by treating that nest, we've still got quite a fair few ants frolicking and doing ant stuff around the surrounding area. So I found over the days after the treatment, there's still some movement around the nest where they're trying to rebuild it. So I spoke to Dr. Joshua King about this, and that's quite normal. What they try to do is rebuild the nest, but if there's no queen and there's no eggs, no brood and no queen, then they'll just die off, and it could take between 3 and 6 weeks for this to happen. So having a bit of activity around the treated nest is not uncommon, but as we know, they are a super pest, and there are some circumstances where there could be a queen that hasn't got the body fat to establish her own nest, and she could be coincidentally able to go into that nest, and they will adopt her in their activity. So it's important to keep an eye on that activity, just to see whether the nest does die off or whether it will need another treatment with another queen adopting that colony. So when we look at it, and I don't know when I do the numbers, but as I said before, we're pouring between 5 litres and 15 litres a minute, depending on the soil type, and in this dry weather, it's very difficult to get it to backfill properly. So what we're trying to do is spending a bit of time to make sure we're doing it correct, killing the queen and killing the brood correctly. So and mature nests, we talk about it could be up to 50 to even 100 litres of water to do a big amount. And I have done a few dozen massive colonies that could have up to 750,000 ants in a colony. So they do get quite big, and quite big mounds. I've seen some quite big mounds as well. So it does take a fair bit of water to backfill that, and to make sure that the queen and the brood is dead. So at 5 litres a minute, just to give you a bit of an idea, 50 litres is 10 minutes. So it takes 10 minutes to treat that nest. So that's extreme, and it could take 20 minutes if it's 100 litres, so. But that's quite extreme and quite bad soil type sort of thing. And often I'm getting them treated. If you get there quick enough and the colony's still quite immature, you can get there and blast it, with even 10 to 40 litres of water. You can get the job done pretty good. So there is a little bit of depends on the colony size, depends on the frequency. So I'm finding I have to fill up my tank of water every 2 or so hours, and I'm finding At the same time, I can fill up my diesel and my petrol tank. So I'm using about, approximately 10 litres of fuel every couple of hours, or so. So we've got a bit of an idea on that. But the process sort of, because people were a bit concerned about paying to fill up the water tank, but you're filling up the water tank at the same time you're filling up your petrol and your diesel for your furnace, and there's also other things you can do in monitoring the area and identifying more fire ants and that, so you're not being unproductive during that fill up time. And because they're two separate systems, I can actually be filling up that tank while I'm still treating the nest as well, is another thing. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to sort of talk about. So if you've got like a few hundred nests on your property, it could take a while to do every nest. And what I'm finding, it's not too bad of a situation, because you get to evaluate over time as well the nest that you've already treated, and you get to keep a good eye on that movement and that sort of stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I'm lobbying the program for some subsidies and that for private property owners to get a little bit of assistance, because it can become a little bit expensive when you've got over 10 acres, especially heavy infestated acres. So but I do deals with property owners, and I have capped it at $1,000. So if you've got a property that's got a lot of fire ants on it, and you're having difficulties treating it, and you might have some stock, or you don't want to, you want to use alternatives to the chemicals at their solution, I will cap your property at $1,000. I have done that to a few property owners now. I do acknowledge that paying to treat your property of fire ants is quite a burden, and you shouldn't have to cover that yourself. And I feel that the government funding should cover that. But in the meantime, while I'm lobbying for that, I'm happy to cap it, and any extra work I'll do for free for the property owner as part of my charity work and part of my desire to get this infestation under control. So feel free to ring me up and talk to me. Like I says, always I'm there to work with the property owners and help them achieve it. I feel we're better off talking about the problems and talking about the infestations and dealing with it, rather than just putting our head in the sand and letting them run wild. So I notice now there's a lot more nests being found in the Lockyer Valley, and I'm very, I suppose, disappointed in the program, or disappointed in the progress of stopping suppressing the infested zone, because it keeps continuing, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of nests in the Amberley, Hagesley, and them areas, and in them ranges out that way. And there's tons in them in between the Warrego and the Cunningham Highway. And I noticed the council's starting to find them in some areas there in the Lockyer Valley quite more regularly now, as well. I seen in the newspaper the other day. So I really think, and I urge policymakers to put more effort into dealing with the infestations of the fire ants, and to work with property owners and give them alternatives to the chemicals, because if they don't want the chemicals and that's the only solution you're giving them, they're not going to report these fire ants. So that's a real big problem for us here. We haven't got fire ants, and we don't want fire ants, so we want to be able to manage these infestations and work with these property owners to get this under control. So that's what I want to do. So I mentioned it before, and I didn't have the book, but this is the textbook that was recommended to me by Dr. Joshua King. This Walter guy was his mentor originally. He's retired now and lives up the road from where he was at the university, but they're still in contact regularly. But this is the book that was recommended by Josh, that has a lot of the research and a lot of the information that they worked out at the University of Florida, and it's quite an easy to read book. One of the most fascinating chapters mating in the colony founding, and which is probably what we want to control the most of. I just wanted to just go through a couple of these points in this book. They can say, and you can buy the book and read it for yourself, but we can say queens usually fly less than 400 metres before settling, but sometimes can fly up to 1.6 kilometres or even more. So generally they don't fly very far, and there has been some that talks about some circumstances where they have flown more, and they found there was 2 islands they cleared. One island was 11.3 kilometres and one 16 kilometres offshore, and they did find that, and they put boats in between there as well during the flights of the ants, and they did find that fire ants did travel that 16 kilometres over that water, and it's not sure whether they would travel that far over land, but they feel that over water they won't land, they'll keep flying. But obviously the more they fly, the more energy they consume, which is the more body fat that they use up, which gives them less opportunity to start. So they put some boats as far out as 4.8 to 8 kilometres offshore as well, and the queens were landing in the boats as well offshore. So that's why they can say that they usually fly less than 400 metres over land to settle, but they can fly 1.6 or even more, and have been recorded as flying quite some distance over water. So and it's quite interesting, you know, the stories that get told in this book. But newly mated queens almost certainly choose their founding nest sites starting while they're airborne. So while they're still flying, what they're saying, they're nearly certainly always looking for a suitable spot to nest, even while they're flying. So they first choose a place to land on the basis of attributes they don't yet understand, but they seem to be most abundant in particularly vegetated, partially vegetated, ecologically disturbed habitats, roadsides, dirt roads, recently disturbed land, and various other messed up properties are good for them to land. So they want disturbed ground, you know, so they're looking as they're flying, they're going to look down, and but they do find themselves, there's a couple of funny stories about, there's a couple of car parks where they can't get away or can't bury or everything, and they end up having to collect hundreds of thousands of these queens over there because it's a good place to collect them for their experiments, because there's a couple of parking lots they end up as well. So but once queens land, they travel between 2 and 50 metres during their search, which half of them travel less than 10 metres or less, within a few minutes to a couple of hours of when they land. So the queen either has found a hole to modify into a nest of her own, or she starts one from scratch. So half the queens are underground within 40 minutes of landing. The founding chamber is rarely more than 2 to 3 metres from the landing spot. So within 2 to 3 metres of where they land is a founding chamber. So that's quite interesting as well. So depending on soil hardness, she digs a descending tunnel ending in a small chamber about 2 to 10 centimetres below the ground. Well before she has reached full depths, she uses pellets resulting from deepening to form a soil plug that closes the nest. So she plugs up her founding chamber and there's no access out. And as she gets deeper, she makes that plug thicker. So reasonably, our queens should avoid nesting near obvious danger. Indeed, when given the choice, queens from polygon colonies prefer to dig their founding chambers in uncontaminated soil rather than in soil contaminated with refuse from their internal enemy. So there's an ant that's their internal enemy over there in Florida. They also avoid soil from other polygon asphycta colonies about 80% of the time. So they don't choose other dead colonies 80% of the time is what they're saying. Both these choices increase the queen's chance of survival. So, which is interesting. So she's in the chamber and she's totally sealed off and she's living off her own body fat. So within 1 to 3 days, the queen begins to lay her eggs and usually has a clump of 15 to 20 by the third day. Within about a week, an eggs clump contains 20 to 100 eggs. 30 to 70 is typical. So at optimal temperatures of about 30 degrees, the first larvae hatch in about a week. The larva stage and the pupal stage each also last about a week. So the first workers appear in about 18 to 20 days. At temperatures below 24 degrees and above 35 degrees, queens fail to rear adult workers. Therefore, when soil temperatures averages less than 24 degrees, colony founding stops. So they can't found a colony if the soil temperature is under 24 degrees. Therefore, when soil temperature averages less than 24 degrees, founding stops. At the other extremes, queens can tolerate occasional days higher than 45 degrees. So, ideal conditions, probably southeast Queensland. Upon hatching, the first stage larva remains stuck on the unhatched eggs. And so the queen will probably lay eggs that they can consume, and that's one of the ways of transferring her body fat to help her workers. So once they appear from 18 to 20 days, doesn't say it here in the book, but I was talking to Josh about it, the minions, they're quite small. The first group of worker ants, they're quite small, but then they'll break free of the chamber and they'll try and find other colonies and steal some brood off other people. So what they call that is the clustral period. So then once they start stealing the brood, they've got another thing here where it's called the incipient phase and brood rating. So that's where they start coming out of that chamber. So it's 20 days that the queen, when the queen lands to when the minions are out stealing the brood, and they're still not trying to collect the mates yet at that stage. But so the timing of this prophylactic treatment, even if the ants are underground, is very hard to time in with the exact timing of the queen ant. So again, that gives me reason to feel that I'm against prophylactic treatment where there's no evidence of fire ants, but also prophylactic treatment when the minions poke their heads out for the first time. The best chance of getting that queen taken care of is having native ants nearby. Native ants will take short work of that nest when it's in that early stage of that colony. Once it gets bigger and more advanced, then it's harder for the native ants to combat it. So it's in the early stages. They talk about there's no native threats to these fire ants, but when the queen's flying or when it's vulnerable, you know, there's dragonflies, there's birds, there's all sorts of threats that can get that queen. It's only when they've turned into a super colony or a major colony that they're going to become problemsome. So, but anyway, guys, that's a little bit more information about fire ants, and it's been a big few weeks, and I'm continuing to learn more and using my machine a lot to treat fire ants. Feel free to reach out, and if you have some fire ant problems, I prefer that I spend some time and work with you to get them dealt with and get them sorted, rather than having the infestation grow. So yeah, the other little thing I'd just like to mention: most people that I have talked to have expressed to me that the sheep and the horses and that, because generally it's the horses and that people don't want chemicals around, that are having this alternative treatment. They suggest to me that the fire ants in plague proportions haven't really affected their horses as such. So there hasn't been too much drama with horses, even from infestation of fire ants. So there's a lot of innuendo, I suppose, about how these ants are killing horses and killing livestock. But even people that have sheep have said the sheep seem to be able to live with them, and there's no real dramas. But I think we've got to get on top of the fire ant population and get them suppressed. I feel we've got to move away from this ridiculous eradication program. I don't see why we can't still try to eradicate fire ants by treating actual fire ants. I don't mind that process, and if it doesn't work, then at least we're doing a good job at suppressing them anyway. So, and I feel treating actual nests with this hot water system is very beneficial for everyone involved, and creates great outcomes. So yeah, again, feel free to reach out, and I encourage everyone to just have a look around their properties and check for fire ants, and if you have any, try and get them dealt with before they become a problem. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good day. Bye.